right. When it comes to race, Boston has some heavy baggage from the Red Sox's reluctance to integrate to the violence surrounding busing in the 70s. And sometimes that makes the media overreact, especially when it comes to the Boston Bruins. WGBH News reporter Adam Riley has more.
Game 1 of the Boston Bruins-Montreal Canadiens playoff series was a nail-biter, with Montreal winning on this blast by defenseman P.K. Subban.
Subban wide and shoots, he scores!
That led to a series of ugly tweets calling Subban the N-word. Cue the familiar storyline. Boston and the Bruins have a race problem.
Are we going back to the days back in the 70s in Boston and the race issues?
Is there a role, a leadership role for the Boston Bruins?
It was dismayingly reminiscent of 2012, when a goal scored against the Bruins by Washington's Joel Ward prompted another batch of racist tweets.
A slew of hateful vitriol hurtling through the Twitter sphere.
But as with that earlier example, it's now clear that the media overreacted. Reports that the N-word was trending among Boston Twitter users after Subban's goal turned out to be bogus. And some of the tweets didn't come from Boston at all. Maybe Dennis and Callahan have a point.
This has nothing to do with Boston. It's just some moron who writes on the bathroom wall. That's all it is.
For what it's worth, Subban seemed to think the media overdid it, too.
It's completely unfair for anybody to point the finger at the organization or the fan base.
But we've done it before, and we'll probably do it again.
Yeah, John, what is your comment usually about the Twitter sphere or comment section? It's like reporting on the comment section. Why did anybody pick this up and run it as a news story when there's no way to verify the sources? There's no way really to figure out where it came from with retweeting and all that. And yet there's something about Bostonians. We like to take a lashing on ourselves. Oh, we must still be back in the dark ages.
Well, and I guess a newspaper in Montreal kind of led the charge in a little bit of the old rivalry there. Well, thank you for recalling my ad nauseum repeated description of the Internet as an open sewer. Yeah. And you have to try to sort out the usable material from the waste. And, Twitter in particular is just an open stream of waste. And, oh my, all of a sudden, after this game, a few sports writers look into it and say, oh my goodness, look, there's waste flowing through that sewage. Hold the presses. So it's ludicrous. And it's really offensive. And it's problematic, too, because this is a serious issue. Racism. In Boston, in American life, in Canada. And to cheapen the issue, to weaken the force of the word racism by applying it to garbage like this is really a disgrace and a mark of poor judgment on any journalist or editor who engaged in it.
You know, on the one hand, I agree with everything you say. On the other hand, I want to be careful about how I say this.
You better be.
But I'm going to be careful, believe me. I do think, and we're talking about a very tiny minority of mouth breathers out there who we really shouldn't be paying attention to. On the other hand, it tends to be hockey that we see this with. It tends to be kind of like the last bastion of white athletes. And I do think that there's this awful, very small group out there who really doesn't like the fact that there are African Americans starting to enter hockey, whereas, we have long since integrated all of the other major sports.
You know, we talked about this on Boston Public Radio. Sorry, John, we mentioned this on the radio, Jim Browdy and I, with Irene Monroe, who is an African-American minister, and she was saying the same thing, that she thinks it's partly that it is, we see white faces in hockey, we don't see black faces in hockey, and this guy got this goal, and so she thought that was part of it too. But on the other hand, I am with you because commenters in general and Twitter in general, which is all anonymous, I think is just kind of so cheapened up the commenting on stories, the Twitter stuff on stories. You read this. Well, I don't read it.
You don't read your own, do you?
I don't read it. No, I don't read my own because it would be an exercise in masochism because, I'm a much more liberal person of a lot of things than Herald readers, and they hate what I write about half the time or 3/4 of the time. So, so it's this. You're right. It's just this sewage.
Yeah. I feel like I'm a little bit on the fence on this because there are occasionally stories on Twitter that do rise, and I'll actually talk about that later on my rave. But I also think this is really more about, this always goes down to reporting for me. Like, if you're a journalist and you see a lot of that happening and you can verify where the tweets are coming from, then that's a story. It just doesn't sound like they did that here. So that's a little bit...
I'm always assuming that whoever puts this out there does it with the intent of creating the kinds of discussions we're having right here. They may not even feel the sentiment. It's just the intent.
Well, you know, also on Twitter, a lot of these people are not anonymous. And when this happened a couple of years ago, a lot of these idiots suddenly realized, oh my God, I did this in public, and they started deleting their Twitter accounts.
Well, good.
And that happened this time, too, because I looked today. I tried to find a lot of the accounts.
And I just want to briefly, respectfully beg to differ on this notion that it's a kind of a hockey thing. I'm a hockey fan, and I guarantee you that if P.K. Subban were a Bruin, or if his brother Malcolm, who's in the Bruins farm system, comes up to the big club and plays well, he'll be the toast of the town, and you won't see oodles of racist tweets about them.
I agree completely. I'm really not talking about real hockey fans, but I do think that there's this tiny minority of racists out there, and for the reasons we've discussed, hockey tends to be the sport they gravitate to.
You know, really in the NBA, you see this term all the time, but it's in a laudatory manner. So this is more directive in hockey, but somehow it's a compliment in the NBA.